Well, hello everyone, and a slightly interesting video today. We're going to talk about Titus Andronicus. Will the real Titus Andronicus please stand up? Shakespeare, because apparently Titus Andronicus is not known to anyone. I really wanted to make this video for a really long time. Not an easy video to make at all. Where did Titus Andronicus come from? Who is he? What's going on? The lamentable tragedy of Titus Andronicus. And what's really interesting about Titus Andronicus, those who know the story, it's all about a bunch of very evil Romans guided by a more evil man, a Moor called Aaron, who leads them astray and gets them to massacre and pick on the family of a man, a general, Roman general, who is loyal to the emperor, called Titus Andronicus. Eventually, this is a story about someone you should not pick on. That's why it's such an interesting play. They're picking on the wrong person. They're picking on someone who will destroy them. They destroy the family of Suetonius, who is the Roman emperor, as revenge for all the terrible things that have been done to Titus. And people have always said this is not a true story. It's not a historical story. What is it? And I'm saying, well, hang on a sec. It's based on stories that happened all around Europe about King Andronicus, the first of the remnant of the Roman Empire. It was called the Greek Empire in the West at the time. And this man is described as the worst tyrant of all time by his contemporaries. So, this is something very interesting indeed. The link of Shakespeare. How did Shakespeare get information, get stories, get ideas? Well, many people think that, he obviously, there were Greek sources, there were Italian sources. Who was the Duke of Athens? The Duke of Athens was it was a small kingdom. It was a Latin successor state of the Byzantine Empire in the 1200s. There is a Duke of Athens in one of Shakespeare's plays. This is so fascinating. What happens in Titus Andronicus? Okay, for those who haven't read it, what happens is Andronicus's family and Romans are more in a romantic relationship with a German princess captured by Andronicus, her family slain and handed over to Suetonius to become the emperor of Rome. So what's going on? So let's get to the plot. So basically, what happens is it's a very convoluted plot, but essentially what happens is Titus Andronicus, here he is, his hand about to be sliced off by the Moor. His daughter is raped by two of Suetonius' sons, the Roman emperor, because they basically raped, cut out the hands of Lavinia, Titus's daughter. His sons are framed. The Moor says, if you send your hand to the Roman emperor, we'll save your sons. His hand is sliced off. The hand is sent away. The heads of his sons come back. It was all a trick, a nasty trick. Titus goes mad. His daughter's been raped, her hands cut off. His sons are dead. What does he do? He hatches an elaborate plot to kill the sons of the Roman emperor. He bakes them into a cake, and he does even more terrible things. He holds a party, and eventually Suetonius is killed, and Titus Andronicus is killed. He kills Lavinia and his own daughter, and he's killed, and his son becomes the emperor. In a way, he wins, and he outwits everyone in a way. Okay, so what has this got to do with history? Well, in history, according to this, what we see here, is it historical at all? And the story of Titus Andronicus is fictional, not historical, unlike Shakespeare's other Roman plays, all of which are based on real historical events. So this is the odd one out. No, not really, because as we're going to see, it seems Shakespeare based this on something that was historical, but is, I believe, a lost text, a lost story about Emperor Andronicus of Byzantium, who was an absolute madman, just absolutely nuts. Absolutely mental. So, supposedly Titus Andronicus set in the time of Theodosius, late imperial Christian Rome. When's the date? When's it dated? Jonathan Bate has pointed out the play begins with Titus returning from a successful 10-year campaign against the Goths, as if at the height of the Roman Empire, but ends with the Goths invading Rome, as if at its death. Oh, that's interesting. The play does not assume political situation known to Roman history. It rather reflects a summary of Roman politics. It is not so much that any particular set of political institutions is assumed in Titus, but rather it includes all the political institutions that Rome ever had. And isn't that reflected in the Byzantine Empire? So, there were stories found all over Europe about a Byzantine emperor who ruled like a tyrant for 3 years. He was a very licentious individual. Titus Andronicus in the Shakespeare story has 21 sons who are killed in the wars or through other means, and he himself is becoming mad, becoming sad. What eventually happens after 3 years of terror, the real Andronicus is basically destroyed by the crowd. He's handed over to the crowd after a coup, and here he is naked on a donkey. So, here we go. And this man, basically, he was a general. He was a good Roman general. He is called the hater of sunlight because of the great number of enemies he had blinded. He was trying to kill off the entire aristocracy of the empire because he suspected everyone. He thought that everyone wanted to rule in his place. He was just, in essence, a terrible person. But what Wikipedia doesn't tell you is it doesn't tell you the myth. It doesn't tell you the stories about this bloke. And to find that, we need to dig deeper. So here's a fantastic article by Severus Neoclus, who's a scholar, and we find so many elements in the stories about Andronicus that we find in Shakespeare's play about Titus Andronicus. So I'm just going to read this, and I hope he doesn't mind, showing his article and all that. But few, if any, rulers of 12th century Christendom received as much attention as Byzantine Emperor Andronicus I. Even though Andronicus lived for less than 3 years, his rise to power, reign of terror, downfall, and gruesome death at the hands of the lynch mob in Constantinople struck contemporaries. In contrast to medieval chroniclers, modern historians have shown little interest in this emperor. And let's see what some people have said about this emperor. He surpassed by far all the tyrants who ever lived. It was a tyranny. Tyranny is a word similar to terrible, a terrible person. So he's a tyrant, a terrible person, rather than an emperor. What else do we have about him? He asserts that his wickedness would not have been so great if he had stopped there, if he had altered his behaviour to that of a human after winning the empire. Quite the contrary, in fact. As soon as Andronicus de facto seized power, he unleashed a reign of political terror. A number of nobles were exiled. Others were cast headlong from the city walls. Others were hanged, while Andronicus inflicted punishments on many more. The hands of some he cut off, and he severed the legs of others. Many were deprived of both hands and eyes. So there's the hand cutting off element that we find in Shakespeare. Several others were impaled outside the city walls, and burial was denied to them. Following the surrender of Nicaea, this was a rebel city, Andronicus went on to besiege rebellious Prusa. When a part of the wall of the city collapsed, imperial troops gained entrance. Andronicus entered the city and lodged within, but did not conduct himself as a meek emperor and saviour before the Prussians, but like a ravenous lion falling on shepherdless flocks. He broke the neck of one, devoured the inward parts of another, and did even worse things to a third. Portioning out his extraordinary fury, he utterly ruined and destroyed the vast majority in manifold and diverse punishments. So this chronicler is saying he is a cannibal, a bloodthirsty soul, wild beast. And this is what we see in Titus Andronicus. We see Andronicus basically he bakes pies with the sons of the emperor who raped his daughter Lavinia. And in a way, Titus Andronicus, it's almost like a prequel to this bloke going mad, taking over the Byzantine Empire. What happened was he actually he was a guardian of the emperor, whom he killed, whom he drowned. He took over the emperor and he tried to exterminate everyone, and it just went out of control. And look, it goes on and on. Andronicus is a cannibalistic beast, flesh-eating, like a cyclops, like a Cyclops. Andronicus became even more human, having taken on the form of a beast. And there were all these stories circulating around Europe, just going around Europe. And most of these stories, there would have been plays, there would have been performances, and most of them are lost. And somehow Shakespeare got his story of Titus Andronicus. Some say it's a terrible play. Why did he write it? What's going on? Why did he fictionalize it? Well, it's from this bloke. And I think that is very clear indeed. We're making it very clear. He sent into banishment the nobles of the empire, having gouged out the eyes of some, cut off the limbs of others. This is what an English chronicler is saying. Roger of Hoveden, I think. Roger's use of the term tyrannus in the context of Andronicus' reign of terror and its explicit identification as a tyrannus of the populum and principiis imperii demonstrate clearly that in contrast to the French accounts, it comes to mean cruel and repressive rather than illegitimate reign. So fascinating, so fascinating. Just so fascinating. I tell you what, and people say this is a work of fiction. We have all these English chroniclers, John of Salisbury, etc. They're all talking about this guy. They're calling him the enemy of the human race. And this is an interesting thing here. His inhumanity and intolerance were such he did not allow any of his people within the range of his sight to sit down in the palace, but he had all of them, or whatever rank or position or dignity, stand like slaves with their mantles removed. It's so fascinating. The excessive impudence of his actions and the insolence of his inhuman heart resulted in his life being spiteful and hateful to nearly everybody. And we actually read about the people of Byzantium living in fear of this man. And eventually, after a coup, he was thrown to the crowd, and the crowd tortured him for 3 days. And there were pictures of this circulated all around Europe, such as this one here. Here we see some courtesan or someone eating his arm. So it's just terrible. It's terrible, but that's what the story is all about. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Shakespeare and history. This was a slightly deviation of a video from the norm. Thank you very much.